A bitter wind swept over the snowbound Montana plains as twilight yielded to a frigid winter night, its icy breath carrying whispers of both loss and possibility. In that desolate expanse, where each gust seemed to echo with distant memories, a solitary carriage creaked toward the rugged ranch of Henry Stanton. Inside the carriage sat Evelyn Ames, a governess whose quiet resilience was as much a part of her as the tattered shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Fleeing a tarnished past, a failed marriage and the harsh judgments of small town, Evelyn had reluctantly taken the job of teaching Henry's orphaned niece, little Margaret, unaware that mysterious Cowboy, whose silent watch concealed untold fortunes, observed her every move from afar. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've got something extra special saved just for you. The carriage rattled along a narrow, frost-crusted road bordered by towering pines and sweeping sagebrush glistening with ice. Evelyn's thoughts swirled like the drifting snow outside, memories of whispered reproaches, the sting of disdain in eyes that had once looked upon her as a disgrace, and now the hum of determined hope. Each creak of the wooden wheels was punctuated by her steady heartbeat as the carriage neared its destination. In the dim light of a winter moon, the long outline of the Stanton Ranch emerged, a sprawling homestead nestled amid rolling hills and framed by an ancient, weathered barn that seemed to guard secrets of bygone days. Stepping from the carriage, Evelyn shivered as the cold air struck her face. The scent of damp earth and pine resin mingled with the faint aroma of wood smoke drifting from a nearby hut. The silence was broken only by the crunch of her boots on the hardened snow and a distant murmur that might have been the low call of an owl or the soft rustle wind through brittle boughs. Something in the hush of that winter night carried an almost sacred quality, as if the vast land itself were silently welcoming a weary traveler in need of solace. Before her lay the main house, a sturdy, two-story structure with clapboard siding painted a fading red and windows that glowed warmly despite the encroaching cold. As Evelyn approached, her eyes were drawn to the figure who stood on the porch. Henry Stanton, the rancher, was a man carved from the frontier itself, grizzled, with eyes that held the depth of many lost years and a face marked by sorrow and quiet determination. He extended a gloved hand in welcome, his gesture as unadorned as the stark reality of his life. "Ms. Ames, I presume?" he said in a low baritone that carried a note of both caution and kindness. His voice was measured, each syllable deliberate, and while his gaze softened as it fell upon her, there was also a hardness that spoke of battles fought against both nature and fate. "Yes, Mr. Stanton. Thank you for having me," Evelyn replied softly, her voice barely rising above the whisper of the wind. Though her words were few, they conveyed a cautious optimism, a hope that she could begin anew in this vast, unyielding land. As she exchanged a brief, knowing glance with him, the faint sound of a horse's hoof struck her ears, a sound that, though distant, reminded her that the outside world held dangers too. Inside the ranch's modest parlor, a fire crackled in a battered stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows over worn, handcrafted furniture. The room smelled of old wood and remembrance, a place where grief had once dwelt but now yielded to resilient pulse of life. In one corner on a small table lay a carved wooden token, a delicate piece fashioned with care, its intricate designs echoing the artistry of local native traditions. Evelyn, despite her haste and shivering limbs, couldn't help but notice the token's quiet beauty. Its presence seemed symbolic, a hint that even in hardship, beauty and hope could be found. That same token, unbeknownst to Evelyn, had often caught the discerning eye of a solitary cowboy who rode the vast expanses of the Stanton lands. Hidden amidst the amber hues of early dawn and the inky black of night, this mysterious figure observed the comings and goings at the ranch. Rumors whispered among the townsfolk described him as a man of few words and even fewer desires, a cowboy who, behind a rough exterior and lonesome demeanor, carried a fortune hidden from the world. Yet his identity and the tragic story of his secret wealth remained veiled in mystery. For now, however, Evelyn's concern lay solely with the task before her, in the gentle routine of the ranch, She was to become the governess for Margaret, a quiet child whose wide eyes had seen too much loss but still shone with flickers of hope. As dinner was served later that evening, a sparse repast of stew and stale bread, Evelyn and Henry exchanged few words. The conversation was punctuated by long, reflective silences that spoke of memories too heavy to disperse lightly. In one quiet moment, while tending to a chipped porcelain cup of coffee, Evelyn caught sight of a small locket resting on a shelf near a window. The locket, delicate and worn, resonated with her own hidden sorrows. Perhaps it was a relic of the rancher's past, or maybe a token passed down through generations as a reminder of lost love and enduring legacy. As night deepened, the ranch began to settle into a quiet routine. Margaret, a solemn child of about 10 with timid eyes, watched in the foot of the staircase as Evelyn carefully arranged a modest lesson plan by the light of the oil lamp. Meanwhile, Henry moved about with the heavy, methodical cadence of one used to solitude, his mind a tapestry of memories that he rarely shared. In the lingering moments before sleep, however, the distant sound of hooves returned, slower this time, yet unmistakable, drawing ever closer to the ranch with a steady, foreboding beat. Evelyn's stomach knotted as she recalled whispered rumors from the nearby town. Rumors of men in tattered coats and unyielding eyes, bounty hunters perhaps, but more ominously, figures tied to the dark chapters of her past. A chill, more penetrating than the winter's bite, gripped her heart as she wondered if fate had come unbidden to reclaim what she had so desperately fled. Across the room, Henry's eyes darkened briefly as he too sensed the approaching threat, his long-practiced caution stirring in the quiet. A few moments later, as the firelight wavered on the rough-hewn walls and the quiet murmurs of the ranch gave way to a charged silence, a subtle but unmistakable sound reached their ears, a soft, deliberate scratch at the door. In that split second, time seemed to slow, the sound echoing in a way that beckoned both dread and an urgent need to act. Henry rose, his face etched with worry and resolve, and exchanged a long, measured look with Evelyn. Their silent communication spoke of an unspoken pact, to confront or at least acknowledge the threat lurking beyond their fragile sanctuary. Evelyn, her eyes steady and determined despite the trembling of her hands, wrapped the threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders and moved toward the door with a cautious step. Outside, the cold winter wind carried the scratches' fading echoes and, in the stillness of night, whispered of secrets and hidden dangers. The ranch, already a place of quiet routine and lingering grief, now stood at the doorstep of uncertainty. With a final, resolute breath, Evelyn paused at the threshold, her gaze lingering on the darkened wooden door as if it might offer a glimpse into the fate that awaited her. In that moment, the vast winter night outside seemed to pulse with the promise of change, a promise that, despite the relentless cold and the mystery of the approaching intruders, hope and the chance for redemption could still be born from the depths of despair. The scratch at the door had ceased, leaving behind an echoing silence that seemed to magnify every soft creak of the ranch's weathered wood. In the tender pre-dawn gloom, Evelyn Ames lingered on the threshold of the Stanton homestead, her heart thrumming with cautious uncertainty. The chill of the Montana night still clung to her threadbare shawl, and each falling flake of snow outside whispered of both hope and hidden danger. Inside, Henry Stanton's steady presence reassured her even as the unexplained intrusion unsettled their fragile beginning. After the unnerving sound, Henry had closed the door with a measured finality, as if to seal away the threat outside. Yet, as he returned to the modest parlor where the low light of an oil lamp danced across rough-hewn furnishings, his thoughtful eyes betrayed a lingering unease. Evelyn, still shivering from the cold and the residue of her troubled past, joined him quietly, her gaze drawn to the intricate wooden token set upon a small, scarred table. The token, a delicate carving of intertwined lines that evoked both nature's resilience and the timeless spirit of the frontier, had caught her eye upon arrival. It was as if it, too, had borne witness to countless secrets, offering a silent pledge that beauty might endure even amid sorrow. Throughout the early hours, as the homestead slowly awakened to the soft rhythms of routine, Evelyn found herself gradually drawn into the domestic pulse of the ranch. Determined to cast off the heavy shroud of her past, she began her duties with gentle diligence. In the small, fading light of morning, she set about preparing lessons for Margaret, the orphaned niece whose wide, watchful eyes revealed scars not just of loss, but of a longing for belonging. During one quiet lesson by the large, drafty window, where the landscape stretched endless and snow-dusted outside, Margaret's hushed questions about the world reminded Evelyn of the fragile spark of hope inherent in each new day. Yet, even as Evelyn began to settle into these duties, subtle hints of unease persisted. While dusting an ancient bookshelf in the parlor, she discovered a small scrap of fabric matching the color of her old dress, a vestige of a life she had desperately fled. The delicate piece lay tucked between battered volumes, as if deliberately hidden. Its presence gnawed at her thoughts, whispering that her past might still seek to reclaim her. Across the room, Henry watched quietly, his expression pensive. Though he spoke little, his eyes, gray with thoughtful sorrow, conveyed that he, too, was no stranger to ghosts of yesteryear. "Some burdens," he murmured with deliberate softness, "seem to follow us no matter how far we roam." His words were sparse, yet they resonated, offering allowances for pain while hinting at the redemption that careful choice might still yield. Outside, the winter silence was intermittently broken by the soft crunch of hooves on ice and snow. At one isolated moment, as Evelyn stepped out to retrieve more firewood near the creaking barn, she caught a fleeting glimpse of a dark silhouette against the frosted horizon. A lone rider, his features obscured by the deep shadow of a wide-brimmed hat, paused at the ranch's edge. For an instant, their eyes seemed to meet, and in that brief, wordless exchange, a potent mixture of warning and curiosity passed between them. Evelyn's pulse quickened as she hurried back inside, the image seared into her memory. Though Henry paid it no overt attention, the flicker of concern in his eyes spoke volumes. It was clear that the mysterious Cowboy, the subject of half-whispered rumors in town, was not merely a passive observer, but perhaps a living embodiment of secrets and fortune hidden beneath layers of solitude and regret. As the day progressed, the ranch's rhythm resumed amidst cautious optimism. Over a sparse meal, during which the crackle of wood smoke melded with the murmur of the coming day, Evelyn found herself engaged in brief, meaningful exchanges with Henry. In one such moment, she inquired softly about a faded locket resting on a mantel, a relic of his lost wife. Henry hesitated before replying, his voice low and laced with regret. "That locket holds one of the last pieces of my past, a promise of what was once cherished." His admission, tender and unguarded, allowed Evelyn a glimpse into the depths of his loneliness and the bitter beauty of his memories. In that exchange, both found a fragile kinship, a shared understanding that scars might one day heal, even if the wounds ran deep. Yet, as the afternoon waned and long shadows stretched across the frost-coated floor, the weight of uncertainty pressed once more. Margaret, quietly attentive to both her new governess and her distant uncle, remarked in a hushed tone while gazing out the frost-laced window, "They say sometimes the past rides on cold winds, waiting to be found." Her innocent words, laden with a gravity beyond her years, unsettled Evelyn's heart. Was it merely the ramblings of a child touched by grief, or a subtle echo of the danger that lay just beyond the periphery of their newfound home? That evening, as the ranch prepared for another biting night, Evelyn took the time to settle into a small, solitary corner of her modest room. Wrapped in her threadbare shawl, she unfurled the scrap of fabric carefully and examined it by the dim glow of an oil lamp. The fabric, soft and strangely familiar, stirred in her a torrent of memories, a reminder of a past filled with betrayal and sorrow. With trembling resolve, she folded it and tucked it deep within the inner lining of her coat, as though in doing so she might banish the specters of her former life. In that quiet act of defiance, she quietly vowed that she would not allow the old wounds to dictate her future. Later that night, amidst the subtle creaks of an aging homestead and the soft murmur of a winter wind, Henry glanced toward the door where the unexpected scratch had once sounded. Within that moment's pause, he met Evelyn's gaze across the flickering lamplight, and they exchanged a look heavy with unspoken concerns. It was a mutual acknowledgement that, despite the fragile routine they were beginning to build, outside forces and whispers of the past might soon shatter their tranquility again. As the final light faded into the cool embrace of night, each of them lay awake in their separate quarters, Evelyn haunted by visions of phantom riders and the heavy echo of the old dress scrap, and Henry gripped by memories of promises unkept and love lost. In the distance, beyond the contours of the rugged Montana landscape and the warm glow of the Stanton Ranch, mysterious hoofprints left their silent testimony upon the snow. And as a gentle knock at the door echoed once again, a soft but deliberate tap that sent a shudder through the stillness, the uncertainty of tomorrow loomed like an uncharted horizon. The soft knock at the door lingered in the heavy silence that followed dusk. Within the parlor of the Stanton Ranch, the flame of the oil lamp trembled against rough-hewn walls while snow fell in quiet drifts outside. Evelyn Ames, still cloaked in her worn shawl and with the scrap of fabric from her past clutched tightly in her hand, exchanged a long, searching glance with Henry Stanton. In that moment, the innocuous tap, the sound of solitary knock, became a harbinger of unsettled forces creeping ever closer from the darkness. Henry's lined face bore the weight of secret sorrows and unspoken memories. Slowly, he rose, the creak of the floorboard echoing as if to announce the intrusion of fate. "Stay," he murmured to Evelyn in a low, steady tone, his eyes already narrowing as he moved stealthily toward the door. The sound receded with each measured step, until, with a delicate yet determined hand, he unlatched the door just a crack. Outside, beyond frosted threshold, the winter night revealed nothing more than the swirling shadow of a rider and the hush of an unsettled wind. For a long, breathless moment, Henry stood at the door, his gaze locked on the empty darkness. Inside, Evelyn pressed a trembling hand to her heart. Margaret, sitting quietly by the window in a threadbare dress and solemn expression far too old for her tender age, regarded the scene with a mixture of apprehension and curious innocence. The silence that followed seemed to thicken the air with expectation. Then, as if in answer to the stillness, a slip of paper fluttered onto the worn wooden floor just inside the doorframe. It was edged in frost and bore a single hastily scrawled message: "Your past rides with you. Beware the coming tide." Evelyn's pulse quickened at those words. They resonated with more than simple warning. They were a cipher of memories she had fought to bury. The message was written in a hand she recognized all too well, a hand that once condemned her to disgrace. Her eyes glistened with fierce determination as she straightened her shoulders. "Henry," she said softly, her voice trembling yet resolute, "this isn't a mere threat. It's a summons from my past. I cannot ignore it." Her words, sparse and careful, reverberated with emotions long subdued. The sting of betrayal, the heavy weight of unshed tears, and the slow burn of defiant hope. Henry glanced at Margaret, whose wide eyes silently pleaded for reassurance, then returned his gaze to Evelyn. "I once believed that every knock was an omen of sorrow," he replied, choosing his word with the care of one who had known too many winters of regret. "But perhaps it is a call for change." His voice was soft, imbued with both an understanding of pain and a quiet promise of protection. Outside, the wind howled as if echoing the message's portent. In the fading light, hoofprints marred the sugar-white snow near the door, those of a rider with deliberate purpose. Henry shifted his stance and moved to peer through the cracked door. For a heartbeat, the cold darkness offered no hint of the rider's presence. Then a faint glimmer, a flash of dark leather and a glimpse of a wide-brimmed hat, passed quickly along the edge of the property. The mysterious cowboy remained elusive, but his fleeting silhouette stirred the ancient rumor that had long surrounded the Stanton homestead. Whispers in town spoke of a reclusive, wealthy cowboy whose silence belied an untold fortune and a past marred by guilt. Yet nothing was known of his true motives. Now, his spectral presence seemed entwined with the message that lay before them. Evelyn's thoughts churned with conflicting emotions. The scrap of fabric from her old dress, hidden so carefully in her shawl, and the harsh message on the folded paper, a summons from a life she had tried so desperately to leave, wove together into a tapestry of pain and resolve. Carefully, she unfolded the note again, reading its cryptic sentence beneath the gentle sputter of the lamp. "Your past rides with you. Beware the coming tide." Was it intended as a threat, a warning, or perhaps both? In that tense moment, Henry stepped back inside and closed the door quietly, as though sealing the chamber from external harm. His eyes softened as he retrieved a small, time-worn locket from his bedside table, a remnant of love that once illuminated his lonely nights. "Sometimes," he murmured, glancing at Evelyn with eyes heavy with personal history, "we must confront the ghosts of our past before we can find peace." His words were few, but each syllable carried the weight of decades lost of longing and loss. Margaret, who had been silently watching, shuffled forward and placed a small, crinkled drawing on the table, a crude sketch of a horse and a house, drawn with trembling little fingers. "They say, when the past rides in, it can bring hope too," she said softly, her voice whispering through the quiet of the room. That innocent statement, spoken by a child who had known only sorrow and fleeting joy, struck a chord deep within Evelyn's heart. Perhaps this dangerous summons was not solely a harbinger of doom, but also an opportunity, a final chance to reclaim her future from the ashes of her former life. Determined, Evelyn rose from the chair. "I must go," she declared, her voice steady though marked by an undercurrent of fear. "I cannot forever hide from what has been written, for it is part of me." Henry reached out, his hand resting gently on hers in a silent plea and promise of solidarity. "I will not let you face it alone," he said quietly, his words a vow stitched into the very fabric of the long, cold night. Together, they stepped out into the frigid air. The snow crunched underfoot as they followed the hoofprints that led away from the front door, guided by the enigmatic message and the fleeting vision of a dark rider. The Montana wilderness loomed vast and unforgiving around them. Icy winds moaned among the pines, and the sharp tang of frost filled their lungs with every cautious breath. In the distance, a solitary figure emerged from the swirling snow, a rider whose appearance was both brief and uncanny. With a furtive glance that seemed to measure the resolve in her eyes, the mysterious cowboy rode past, his silhouette a dark blur against the awakening sky. His presence was an ephemeral confirmation of the rumors that had long circled like sparrows around the Stanton ranch. Though his features remained obscured, his deliberate pace and the quiet intensity of his gaze sent a shiver through Evelyn. The cowboy, clearly a man of hidden depths and equally hidden fortunes, had become an unspoken mystery, an unseen witness to their plight, perhaps even a reluctant guardian. For a moment, as the figure receded into the horizon, the silence seemed to shout. The threat was real and yet strangely ambiguous, woven with threads of danger and possibility. Henry and Evelyn exchanged a measured look, each silently agreeing that this journey now had two competing poles: the call to confront a past that had been chasing them and the hope of forging a future unburdened by it. As they walked back toward the ranch house, beneath the stretching arms of snow-brushed pines and along a trail marked by the gentle patter of a waning storm, Henry's gaze softened. "Sometimes the past teaches us to live in its shadow so that we can finally step into the light," he said, his voice quiet and introspective. Evelyn nodded slowly, the lock and the wooden token pressing warm reminders against her skin, symbols of both pain and possible redemption. At the entrance of the homestead, as the day's first golden rays touched the cold, frost-laden ground, Margaret appeared in the doorway, her small face set in a determined scowl. "I drew something new," she said, presenting another sketch, a drawing of a house with a bright window, surrounded by figures holding hands. Her innocent vision brought a tender smile to both Henry and Evelyn, reinforcing the gentle promise that life, even marred by hardship, could be reimagined. Yet as they gathered to share this small moment of hope, a second, sharper knock resounded at the door, a sound that wasn't a random creak of old wood but an unmistakable signal of impending confrontation. Henry's hand went to the locket once more, and Evelyn's heart skipped a beat as they braced themselves for what was to come. In that charged moment, laden with the tension of incoming danger and the promise of personal transformation, the door hung ajar, its threshold separating the fragile sanctuary of their newly forged home from the uncertain wilderness of their past. The echo of that knock reverberated in their souls, a call whose answer would determine the course of their intertwined destinies. The sharper knock at the door resounded with a weight that could not be ignored. In the dim glow of the parlor where the oil lamp flickered over time-worn walls, Henry's face hardened into a mask of grim resolve, while Evelyn gripped a familiar scrap of fabric from her old dress. Margaret huddled at the doorway, eyes wide with a mix of apprehension and tentative hope. The quiet that had enveloped the Stanton homestead since the warning note was now shattered by that persistent, deliberate tap, a harbinger of an imminent confrontation. Henry moved first, with measured steps. He crossed the room, his hand briefly resting on the locket that had once belonged to his lost wife. The token, a small relic of a bygone tenderness, offered him silent counsel as he approached the door. Evelyn followed, her shawl wrapped snugly about her shoulders, the fabric a barrier against both chill and memories of a past that had haunted her for too long. They exchanged a look, one filled with mutual determination, layered with the heavy secrets of grief and survival. At the door's threshold, Henry unlatched it slowly and opened it just enough to reveal the half-darkened outline of a stranger. A tall, gaunt man lingered on the snowy porch, his features obscured beneath the brim of a worn hat. In his gloved hand, he clutched a folded letter, its edges worn and damp from the cold. For a moment, no words passed between them, only the sound of the wind stirring the pine needles outside and the soft whisper of falling snow. The stranger's eyes, when they met Henry's, sparked with a glint of mysterious familiarity. Evelyn's heart pounded as she sensed that this was no ordinary messenger. In a voice barely above a murmur, the stranger spoke. "A letter for you, Mr. Stanton, delivered from the past." His tone was ambiguous, carrying both warning and a tinge of regret. The letter was extended toward Henry, and he took it with cautious hands. The stranger then turned and, without another word, melted back into the dark of the Montana night as silently as he had arrived. Inside, Henry unfolded the letter with deliberate care. Its handwriting was unmistakable, a familiar scrawl that stirred bitter memories. Evelyn's pulse quickened as she read along with him. The note bore a single message: "The past is never as far as it seems. Prepare for what rides in with the coming tide." The message was succinct, ominously cryptic, and dealt a fresh blow to Evelyn's already troubled heart. It was signed simply with an initial, M. For a long, heavy moment, silence reigned in the parlor. Margaret's small face was hidden behind a curtain of dark hair as she watched the exchange, her eyes reflecting both fear and resilience. Henry's gaze darkened with remorse as he recalled painful days when he, too, had been haunted by a past that refused to be forgotten. "It appears," he said lowly, "that someone from your past is not finished with you, Miss Ames." His words were gentle, yet they carried the silent promise of protection. Evelyn's eyes welled with unshed tears as the weight of the letter settled upon her. The signature, M, was as chilling as it was personal. She knew, with a shudder, that it was a remnant of a life she had desperately tried to escape, a life filled with abuse and bitter betrayal. Yet in this moment, staring at the letter, she also felt a stirring, a seed of defiant resilience. "I must not be defined by who I was," she whispered, her voice trembling with both sorrow and steadfast resolve. "I will not let these shadows claim my future." The conversation between Henry and Evelyn was interrupted by a sudden sound, a low, deliberate growl, as if the very wind had taken on a menacing tone. Echoing across the snowy expanse outside, through the window, the three of them could see the faint glimmer of headlights and the silhouettes of riders approaching with measured intent. The mysterious cowboy, whose distant figure had once been nothing more than a rumor, now seemed to loom larger than ever. Those features remained uncertain. His presence was unmistakable, a silent sentinel whose motives were as murky as the snows that blanketed the land. Henry's expression grew grave as he looked at Evelyn. "We must prepare," he said quietly, a note of urgency underlying his measured tone. "There's more at play here than simple chance. Your past, it seems, still calls to you, and this rider, he may be more than just an onlooker." His gaze flickered briefly toward the window, where hoofprints marked a trail leading to the ranch's rear, a trail that, until now, had been almost invisible in the drifting snow. Evelyn gathered herself, clutching her shawl as if it were a shield. She paced slowly near the door, her mind racing with the implications of the letter and the cryptic warning it bore. In that tense moment, Margaret approached timidly, holding out a drawing she had made, an image of a small house with an open door and a luminous heart at its center. The child's innocent art, offered in a voice barely above a whisper, said, "This is what hope looks like." Despite the uncertainty swirling around them, the drawing connected them to a future that was not yet written by sorrow. Tears glistened in Evelyn's eyes as she took the paper. "Thank you, Margaret," she murmured, her voice imbued with a mix of gratitude and fierce determination. The gesture, so simple yet deeply moving, served as a quiet reminder that life's promise could be nurtured even in the coldest of winters. Outside, the sound of approaching riders grew louder, the crunch of their hooves and the rhythmic clatter of equipment merging into an ominous cadence. Henry drew a deep breath and looked at Evelyn with an unwavering gaze, as if willing her to share his resolve. "We will face what comes," he said softly. "You do not have to run from this any longer. Here, within these walls, we forge our own destiny." His words, measured and steady, wrapped around her like a warm blanket on a bitter night. At that very moment, the distant figure of the cowboy became clearer against the pale sky. A solitary rider, his silhouette remarkable even from afar, paused on the ridge beyond the ranch. His dark eyes, though hidden beneath the brim of a weathered hat, sparked with an intensity that hinted at hidden truths. Was he friend or foe? His presence was a mystery, one that added further layers of complexity to Evelyn's troubled past. The letter's message, the draw of old shadows, and the destiny now unfolding at the Stanton Ranch all converged in that poignant instant. In the growing light of dawn, as the riders approached, seemed to lessen momentarily, a lull that was perhaps to calm before yet another storm. Evelyn steeled herself. Looking at Henry with determined eyes, she whispered, "I will no longer hide. I choose to confront the truth of my past, to embrace a future where I am the one in control." Her voice, though soft, carried the echo of every trial she had endured, and in it lay the promise of a new beginning. Henry's face softened into a gentle smile, his eyes reflecting both pride and a cautious hope born of shared struggles. "Then we move forward together," he replied, his hand reaching out to squeeze hers in a silent pact of solidarity. Their bond deepened in that moment, a weaving together the ragged threads of pain and the shimmering promise of redemption. As the distant riders drew closer once more, their hooves stamping an unyielding reminder in the fresh snow outside, the tension in the Stanton homestead reached its crest. The sharp, icy air carried whispers of an unseen enemy. And yet, within those fraught moments, a resilient hope blazed brighter than the winter sun. The path ahead was uncertain, shrouded in the mist of old grudges and new possibilities. But with Henry's steadfast protection and Evelyn's emerging courage, they were ready to face whatever came. In that fragile dawn, as the first true light broke over snow-dusted pines and the cold wind whispered of both agony and triumph, the silent call of destiny resounded. The future had arrived unbidden, laden with mysteries and marked by the scars of the past. Yet within the hearts of Evelyn, Henry, and even little Margaret, whose quiet art had captured the essence of hope, a determination stirred, a vow that the darkness would not claim them, that from the ashes of old wounds a new life, forged in defiant truth and tender partnership, would rise. The sound of hooves faded into the background, replaced by the steady rhythm of their hearts as they prepared to step into the uncertain light of a new day, a day that promised change, healing, and answers yet to be unveiled. Dawn broke with the delicate bloom of light over the snow-dusted Montana plains, its gentle hues promising new beginnings. The tension that had gripped the Stanton homestead through the long, haunted night finally began to thaw as the approaching riders drew near. Outside the old cabin, where the eerie sound of the door's knock had signified hidden secrets and the specter of Evelyn's past, the riders' determined hooves now pounded the frozen ground in unison, a relentless drumbeat of imminent confrontation. Inside the cabin's narrow parlor, Henry Stanton and Evelyn Ames exchanged a resolute, unspoken look. Across from them, Margaret sat with a guarded curiosity, her small hands clutching a faded drawing, her hopeful vision of a home warm with love. The carved wooden token, the scrap of fabric from Evelyn's old dress, and the note signed M lay scattered on the rough table like remnants of a forgotten past. All these symbols, charged with meaning, now served as a crucible for transformation. Henry's steady hand rested on the locket that had once belonged to his late wife, its delicate inscription now a bridge between sorrow and remembrance. "We must face whatever rides over the coming tide," he declared quietly, his voice a blend of caution and resolve. Evelyn, her gaze drawn to a window, could barely catch a glimpse of the riders, a phalanx of shadowy figures advancing steadily along the ridge. Yet there was something else in the distance. The mysterious cowboy, whose presence had been whispered about in hushed tones and now, in the tentative light, began to emerge as a tangible force. At that moment, a gust of wind swept across the porch, carrying with a small, intricately folded letter that fluttered against the doorframe. The letter, bound by a strip of fraying leather, bore a crest that matched the carving on the token, a subtle emblem hinting at lineage and legacy. With trembling hands, Henry retrieved the letter and unfolded it slowly, as though afraid that haste might shatter its delicate promise. The words, written in a refined yet urgent hand, revealed hints of a shared history, the secret identity of the cowboy, his true wealth hidden beneath layers of solitude and personal tragedy, and a declaration that he sought to protect the ranch and the lives it sheltered. Evelyn's heart pounded as she read over his shoulder. "It is from Benjamin," the note began, "a name long held in secret by one you have seen, a man burdened by guilt yet driven by honor. My loyalty lies with you, and I have watched over the Stanton homestead since my days of reckoning. Beware those who would use your past as a shackle, for I offer sanctuary to those who deserve redemption." The signature was nothing more than the initial B, elegant and mysterious. In that moment, the overlapping fragments of mystery, the threatening note, the echo of the knock, and the fleeting glimpses of the cowboy, coalesced into a shocking revelation. The elusive cowboy was none other than Benjamin Blackwood, a recluse of vast means whose heart had once been broken by loss and failure, and who now walked the land in quiet redemption. Henry's eyes softened, and he looked at Evelyn with an intensity that belied his stoic exterior. "I have heard rumors of a man called Blackwood," he murmured, the name rolling off his tongue like an incantation. "They say he once owned lands far and wide, only to lose everything to misfortune. Yet he never truly left. He lingers, watching, waiting to make amends." As if on cue, a distant silhouette on horseback, dark and stately, appeared against the pastel light of early morning. The rider moved with deliberate grace, his presence exuding both mystery and quiet power. Though his features were hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat and a heavy duster, the hint of a refined bearing was unmistakable, and the glint of something metallic, perhaps a signet ring or engraved buckle, spoke of forgotten wealth. Evelyn's gaze flickered between Henry and the approaching man. The storm of her past, the fearful specter of those who sought to drag her back to shame, had given way to a complex mixture of hope and apprehension. The letter from B was both a promised protection and a clarion call to confront her history. I never imagined," she managed to say softly, "that someone would care enough to watch over us so silently." Her voice bore the tremor of vulnerability mixed with budding resolve. Henry moved closer, placing a comforting hand on hers. "Sometimes redemption finds us through unexpected messengers," he replied, his tone measured yet sincere. We have our scars, and they do not define us, only what we choose to do with them. His words, simple yet profound, resonated in the frostbitten air as the distant rider, Blackwood, drew nearer, his steady pace eventually halting just beyond the porch. The cowboy dismounted with fluid grace, approaching the front door as if summoned by fate itself. For several long moments, all were silent. Blackwood's eyes met Henry's with guarded empathy, and then turned to Evelyn. In that brief, charged exchange is filled with unspoken apologies and promises of aid as the first light shining over the Montana hills. The cowboy spoke no words, yet his presence said all, gently. He produced from beneath his duster a small, ornate scarf, woven with symbols that mirrored those on the wooden token and the letter. With a respectful nod, he extended the scarf toward Evelyn, a silent gift, a token of alliance and protective intent. Evelyn hesitated only a heartbeat before accepting the scarf. Its soft fabric, warmed by the subtle scent of sandalwood and cedar, felt like a barrier against the chill of old wounds. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes shining with cautious gratitude. Margaret, peeking from behind a corner, clutched her drawing and offered a small, tentative smile, as if the gesture affirmed that hope was indeed possible. Blackwood inclined his head slightly, his dark gaze lingering on the assembled trio before he stepped back toward his horse. "I have come not as an enemy, but as a guardian," his eyes seemed to say, and with that, he mounted and rode off into the radiant dawn, leaving a trail of mystery and promise in his wake. For a long moment after his departure, the world seemed to pause. The thread of those tied to Evelyn's past had, for now, receded, replaced by an intricate tapestry of newfound possibilities. Henry folded the letter carefully and tucked it away, as if safeguarding its revelations for the days ahead. "It appears," he said quietly, leaning close to Evelyn, "that your past may be less a curse than a connection, a bridge to understanding your own strength." His tone was as soft as a morning breeze, yet resolute in its offering of hope. Evelyn wrapped the ornate scarf tightly around her neck, the fabric a tangible reminder that even in a world rife with sorrow and judgment, love and protection could blossom in the unlikeliest of forms. "I choose to step forward," she declared, her voice a mix of trepidation and burgeoning courage. "I choose to build a new life for Margaret and me, and perhaps even heal the part of me left broken by what came before." Her words were a vow, a quiet promise that the woman she once was would not chain her to the past, but instead guide her toward her own rebirth. Margaret, from her quiet corner, stepped forward and pressed her small hand into Evelyn's. In that innocent gesture lay the hope of a future unburdened by the bitterness of old wounds. Henry and Evelyn exchanged a look, a mutual, unspoken understanding that though the path ahead might be fraught with challenges from lingering threats and the complexities of the past, together they would forge a future defined by redemption and healing. Outside, the first full light of the Montana morning illuminated the ridges and plains, scattering the last shadows of night with radiant promise. The delicate interplay of frost and fire in the dawn's embrace whispered that while old ghosts might still linger, they no longer held dominion over these hearts. The thread of the riders had been deflected, and the enigma of Blackwood's intervention offered a new lens through which to view their intertwined fates. As the day advanced slowly, with the sound of the ranch resuming its gentle rhythm, Henry closed the door against the lingering chill of that perilous night. Yet, in the silence that followed, a gentle murmur of possibility stirred, an invitation for change and for the healing of broken souls. With the ornate scarf wrapped near her heart and the wooden token, locket, and letter now safeguarded as emblems of their shared struggles, Evelyn knew that the labyrinth of her past had lost its power. Instead, a fragile, luminous future beckoned, a future where she, Henry, and little Margaret might together reclaim life with unyielding hope. In the quiet aftermath, as the Montana plains basked in the soft glow of renewed potential, the conversation between Evelyn and Henry turned to simpler matters. Plans to secure the ranch, to care for Margaret, and to honor the unspoken promise that every dawn carried. Their voices, though low, held conviction and a newfound strength, a strength born not solely from surviving hardship, but from transforming it into a foundation for tomorrow. As the day unfurled and the gentle warmth of hope spread over the barren horizon, a lingering question remained like a whisper on the wind. Will the shadows of the past ever fully vanish, or will they continue to shape the destiny of those brave enough to rise above it? With that quiet, open-ended note, their journey, full of redemption, resilience, and the promise of love unbound by sorrow, continued into the radiant unknown,